Hey, it's Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online U.S. History from 1877 to present. Today we'll pick up with the U.S. History Review. And we keep telling you now that U.S. History test is very important because it's the last test that you have to take, of course, as a gateway, of course, to becoming a senior. So we're going to try to offer you some tips and some things that you can do, of course, to improve your score. Today we're going to pick up with lesson 4, which is populism. And populism is a movement with farmers. And what it was designed to do is improve the conditions that farmers faced during the late 1800s. What we'll do is we'll start, of course, with the U.S. History Test Blueprint. And each one of these lessons that what we've done is we try to impress upon you the importance of looking at this test blueprint and then, then tailoring your review around these these categories. When you look at it, the one that we said that had the most weight was the contemporary United States, and it covers standards 10, 11, and 12, and those objectives. So, and it has like 30% of the test, of course, could be there. But you can't go back and not look at, of course, the establishment as a world power in terms of looking at imperialism, and then World War I also, has a lot of weight. What we'll do, of course, is start by looking at this standard. It says westward expansion in the New South, trace how developments and the westward movement impacted regional differences in democracy and post-Reconstruction era. And what we're going to basically do is look at, farmers in terms of the things that farmers face in terms of the populist movement that was created, of course, to improve their conditions. And we also have 5 supporting objectives that go along with standard number 1, westward expansion in the New South. All right. Agrarian discontent and economic inequality. Agrarian, there's a word for you. Agrarian basically is not a word, of course, that you should be afraid of. What it basically means is farming. It means agriculture. So agricultural discontent and economic equality. Populism emerged as a response to the economic struggles of farmers, particularly in the South and the West, who faced failing crop prices, high railroad shipping rates, and crushing debt. Farmers were frustrated with the economic system that benefited big business and bankers while leaving them in poverty. Populists called for reforms to help the working class and agriculture workers. Here on the right, you'll see a picture of a cartoon, of course, with William Jennings Bryan, who becomes the champion and also becomes the, the candidate for the Populist Party in the election of 1896. And here he's holding this cross. And what he basically said when he made this cross of gold speech is that we won't sacrifice farmers on a cross of gold. In other words, it's here. He didn't believe, and they didn't believe that the gold standard benefited farmers. They didn't think the gold standard didn't put enough money into circulation, which kept prices at a level in which farmers didn't have enough money, in circulation. What farmers wanted was inflation and not deflation. And what they believed is by increasing silver and letting silver be the standard, of course, for America's currency, would put more money in circulation, which means that higher prices or inflation for their crops would benefit them. The free silver movement, and once again, farmers didn't believe in the gold standard. They wanted free silver. They wanted silver to back America's currency. One of the central tenets of the populist movement was the call for free coinage of silver to increase the money supply and alleviate deflationary pressures on the economy. So no deflation, they wanted inflation. Populists believed that expanding the money supply through silver coinage would help farmers by making credit more accessible and raising crop prices, which were often too low to cover their costs. Government regulation and the railroads. One of the problems that farmers also believed is that they were at the mercy of big businesses, especially big railroad companies. And what these big railroad companies would do is would charge unfair rates, in their mind, unfair rates. Populists were strongly critical of power and control exerted by railroad companies, which they saw as monopolistic and exploitative. Populists advocated for government regulation of the railroads, including the nationalization of the railroads. In other words, have the government take over the railroads and establish the rates, the government establish the rates to ensure fair pricing and prevent price gouging. This also extended to other monopolistic practices by large corporations that hurt farmers and workers. So not only did farmers, of course, want to improve things for themselves, but they also wanted to improve things for the American worker also. Direct democracy and political reforms. One of the things that populists wanted to do was to get workers on their side also. So if they got workers on their side, then workers could put pressure, of course, on the government, and then the farmers could put pressure on the government, and change, of course, could happen if that happened. Populists like progressives push for political reforms that would give more power to common people and reduce the influence of corporate elites. And the corruption of political machines like Tammany Hall. And once again, all this stuff that you see in here, all of these different things, we will go over them a little bit later, and we'll give you some of these things, of course, in your fact list. These reforms included direct election of senators, which we talked about with the 17th Amendment, initiative referendum recall, which we talked about, also the secret ballot, all intended to make political system more responsive to the needs of ordinary citizens. And what you see over here, of course, is the cartoon, and it says Tammany Hall victory. And Tammany Hall was a political machine in New York that when immigrants came off the boats from various places in Europe, they were met by these party bosses or these political operatives that would encourage them, in this particular case in New York, to vote Democrat and support Boss Tweed. The People's Party and the 1896 election. Now, we told you that the candidate for the Populists in 1896 was William Jennings Bryan. Remember the one that had the cross of gold, of course? The Populist movement culminated in the formation of the People's Party, also known as the Populist Party in 1892, which sought to represent farmers, laborers, and reform-minded citizens. In 1896 presidential election, the Populists supported Democrat William Jennings Bryan, who campaigned on a pro-civil platform. While they were ultimately defeated, the Populists left a lasting influence in American politics, particularly in terms of advocating for economic and political reforms. All right, that concludes the brief recap of what you should know, and these, once again, are the facts. And after each one of these recaps, what we try to do is give you a fact list. And once again, these facts are very important to you being able to do well when it comes to the state test. And I would dare say that your success will depend a great deal on how well you know some of these facts. And in this particular case, we had 10 that we put up here, and they included some of the things that we've already gone over. My advice to you, once again, is to do what we tell you to have told you before. Create flashcards. These flashcards are very important because what they do is they allow you to learn a lot of information real fast. All right, this is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online U.S. History. And remember what we said now, this U.S. History test is very, very important because it's the last one that you take. And if you do well on this one here, it is the gateway to you becoming a senior and being able to graduate on time. Once again, this is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online U.S. History from 1877 to present, and we'll see you next time.